And according to this, we are live. So I want to welcome everybody to Monday Whispers Chat. So Monday Whispers Chat is all about being able to feature amazing and inspiring women. And because Bridging the Gap Wellness is all about being able to create a holistic life and helping you find balance. And so this week we have with us Marnee Buckles with Behaviour Strats. And so Marnie's going to talk to us about children with exceptional needs versus school. And so welcome, Marnee. So did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'd be happy to. Thanks for the invitation, first of all. And I also have to say, I may be speaking for myself and my rather old colleague, who has decided he needs to be part of the conversation here and there. So if you do hear that, it's just him. So I met Rollie, I think it's 5-6 years ago on Bear Island. And when I left that, I decided to start a career as behavior interventionist. I had worked in York Region as one, and it appeared to me that there was a fair bit of help in certain areas for children, not so much help for parents. So when I started Behaviour Strats, it was supposed to be for educators and parents so that they have someone to talk about the strategies that they were just given in a cycle assessment that they may or may not understand. So I worked with different school boards in Ontario and Quebec, private, public, and I worked with parents via Skype, a lot of that. I'm from Aurora, but the virtual meetings have been great. So just like this one. So that's an intro. Background in education, 33 years and counting. So
nice. So one of the things is, so Marnee actually explained that one of the things where I actually met her was on Bear Island. And so for those of you who don't know our area, so where I live is in northeastern Ontario. And so Bear Island is about a half an hour, it's a half an hour drive to get to Temagami. And then there's still a boat ride because it's boat access only onto Bear Island, which is one of our Aboriginal reserves in Temagami area. And so so that is where I actually met Marnee, and was completely fascinated with the way and Marnie's approaches and the way that she actually handles things and deals with things, is because one of the things, it's really difficult sometimes for me to be able to meet up with people who have that same approach of, the kids have a voice and the kids have some really important information to be able to share in, so that when their behavior is acting up, they're trying to tell us something. And so usually the responses that I usually get from people are that they're trying to say something, but they are, the adults don't want to hear about it. It's like, do what it is that I'm telling you to do, and this is what you need to do, and it doesn't matter what it is that you're feeling or thinking. And so meeting Marnee was like, wow, somebody else actually wants to hear what the kids have to say and wants to know, like, what's causing them that distress, why are they in distress, and how can we actually help them be able to work through it. And so there was one example, like one particular young guy who there was a lot of behaviors and the teachers were having difficulties, and there was like all these things that were actually happening. And I just happened to be in the classroom that day, and it was just really interesting because there was somebody else doing a presentation and I just happened to be at the back. And so while I was at the back, I could see this poor little guy who was constantly having outbursts and having all these difficulties. And one of the things that was happening is that somebody was picking on him. And so when the teachers would actually get the outbursts, it would be because he had been picked on 5 or 6 times, and then he would have his outbursts, and then he would be the kid that would be getting into trouble. And so it was like a great way of being able to, as a team, being able to sit down and figure out how can we actually help this kid not have the outbursts, and how to be able to talk about how to handle those situations. And so, and Marnee is fabulous at helping you come up with some solutions that actually works for the adults and for the kids. And so both in school and at home. And so that was one of the things that I thought, like, wow, Marnie's got this. Marnie's got this covered, and I think that that's absolutely amazing. And so, can you tell me a little bit more, Marnie, about what is it that you do to be able to help people with some of the strategies that you use?
Well, you just did that really well. So when I'm looking for a when I'm looking for the next assistant, I'm going to hire you. So what it really is that it's a team approach. So the kid has got something to say. His behavior, her behavior is communication, regardless of whether there's a diagnosis or not. It's a behavior. So we need to look at where that behavior is coming from, and we can't be psychic. So we need to talk about the whole picture. What happened right before, which we call an antecedent. We need to talk about home. We need to talk with home. Whether or not they're on the same page with us, we have to involve them. One of my stories, again, just going back to Behaviour Strats and why I started it, and I'm just going to throw it in, it's related a little, is last year, I was on a very fly-in, and I found out that from this reserve, there were probably about 55 kids that went to the public school, and there was one specialized class for behavior. We don't call them behavior anymore, but they're called various things, multiple diagnoses. It was behavior class. The behavior class was made up entirely of First Nation students. So that's something else that I do too. So you advocate for the families where, and I've done it in York Region too, and they're not First Nation students, but they're in a class, or a child has been told, parents have been told, well, he doesn't belong here. He belongs in a class in York Region an hour and a half from here in a behavior class because he's really got significant needs and we can't handle him. If you come in with some strategies, and if you work with family and those educators before they get to the point where they say, he just can't be handled here, sometimes you can move mountains as a whole team. I just worked with Bear Island today again, and they're wonderful. They work with me for specialized cases where in our school, they know in our school setting in York Region, those students may be put elsewhere or might have been put elsewhere in other classes. They want to keep the students in the class. It's hard work. So yep. Those strategies have to work at home. So you need time to work with families, and you need time to work with staff. And you need to time to speak with children, no matter what age they are, to find out what it is that's causing the behavior. But it's not an analytical approach, and I don't do assessments. It's observations and getting history from everyone who'll tell me about that child.
And it's and that history, like, can you tell me a little bit more about the importance of the history, Marnie?
So for example, here's one that comes to mind. You have a student who is acting out in a grade 6 class. Just pick that one. One of the first things I say is, it's October. Has it been all year? That's one little tiny piece of history. No, it's been the last 2 weeks. What happened in the last 2 weeks? Nothing that we know of. Have you called home recently? No, we haven't. We can make a phone call, this goes with any board, any school, and say, you know what, these behaviors have really escalated quickly. Is there something going on? And every school I go to that has already hired me and I'm returning to, that's the first thing they'll tell me. Marnie, we know what's going on at home. Mom left, dad left, mom's in hospital, dad's in hospital, grandma just died, on and on it goes. So what are the behaviors you're looking at? That's one. We had a great case a few years ago where a student, if we looked back in the OSR and we called previous schools, that student had never once been a behavior concern. He was the worst behaved student in the entire class. What had happened? He happened to be a First Nation student. What had happened is he was catapulted right out of his home, his community, his family, and he was brought to live with aunt. And he was not going to get over it in a hurry. And that was the behavior they dealt with for the entire year, actually. It's unbelievable. Did he have learning disabilities? No. He had emotional, social issues. He didn't want to be there. And he was telling us in every way he could. And if you knew his background, I'd want to be with my family too. But he couldn't be right then. So we had to come up with some strategies. We worked with teams, work with social workers sometimes. We worked with anyone who's living with that child.
And like those are things that are like really important, is that whole part of things. So so with bridging the gap, that's one of the things that I really focus on, is that holistic part of people's lives. And so it's being able to kind of take a look at like the whole picture of everything. And like you said, so you obviously can't change certain circumstances, and it took them a whole year to be able to work with this particular with the behavior, but being able to understand where the behavior is coming from and helping people come through allows them to be able to understand and have some sort of options when the behavior is actually kicking in. And so Sherry Clark actually came on, and I just want to acknowledge, so she said hello. So for those of you who are watching, I want to make sure that hop on and say hello. If this is a replay that you guys are on, then put your question inside. Marnee will be more than happy to come back and answer different questions. And but we're here to be able to have that dialogue. So if you guys have any questions or have any examples, we'd love to be able to hear from you, because I'm sure that these are not isolated. I'm saying I'm sure, but I know that these are not isolated instances, that in terms of the examples that we're giving. So whether you're an educator, whether you and some of these behaviors are happen in daycare as well. And so Karen is here watching live. And so, but just really important for us to be able to have that discussion about how are some of the things and some of the strategies that you can have. And so one of the things that I just shared on my own personal page earlier today was some of the challenges that it was for me as a mom to have a child that had learning disabilities. And so with the learning disabilities also came behaviors. And so with those behaviors, those were challenging. So as a parent, it was frustrating to get those phone calls from the teacher saying, okay, well, he needs to be taken out of my class, and we need to do this, and you need to come and pick him up because he's suspended again, and like all these other things. And it's like, but if you actually work with me, we can actually make we can actually create a plan so that we can actually keep him at school. It's important for him to be at school. And if we continue to remove him from school, it's not going to help. And so my son at a very early age was diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia. He also has ODD and ADHD. So like you put all that stuff on top of everything, and you've got this whole, oh, and then he has central auditory problems. And so you've got like all these little things that are actually going on. And when we actually made sure that he was positioned in the right spot in the classroom, when we made sure that he had a strategy so that when anxiety started to kick in and he had a plan, well, then he could actually activate his own plan. And he knew that he could actually go to his safe place. And for him, for a long time, his safe place was, well, at first it was the child and youth worker room, but then we switched it on his request to put it to the principal's office. And so like all these different things. So when he would go to the principal's office, he would be getting into trouble, but he wasn't having to go to the child and youth worker room, which was causing a whole lot of social questions from some of his classmates. So like, what kind of strategies can you use for these moms or dads that are struggling with these behaviors that are actually happening? They happen at school, but they also happen at home.
Well, first of all, by the way, if Sherry Clark's there still, I taught her kids years ago. So, you know, I have no idea why she's just being such a supportive parent. They're all adults. Okay. So anyways, so strategies. You can't pull all strategies out of a box that will work for all kids, obviously. But some of the strategies, I'll tell you some of the recent ones I've worked with that I still find fascinating are whether you're buying into negative attention seeking or positive attention seeking. So I'm working with a family right now. It just so happens both of the parents are teachers. They've got a 12-year-old that they've had great difficulty with a long time with behaviors. And it's a little backwards in that the behaviors at home more so at school. That's part of your history piece. And we've worked through that. I said to them on our last visit, I said, is it possible that he really needs a lot of attention? And they said, no, he certainly doesn't want it. He wants to be away from us. Think school again. He does want attention. He gets about an hour and a half to 2 hours of fighting every night. That's attention.
Yeah.
So that took a little while because honestly, both of them truly believe, no, he doesn't want to be with us. He doesn't want our attention, but he's getting it because he wants it. What you have to do is flip it. So go back to the classroom. You've got students that are communicating. They want attention, and often they do it for negative attention because that's what they're used to doing. It's something they've learned a long time ago, or even recently. They pick it from other students. We need to work with teachers to say, why do you keep responding? Why do you walk up to that student when he hurls or whatever kind of language is coming in his mouth? You need pat, quick answers to say, for example, and my favorite is the Arnold. Anyone who's worked with me knows the Arnold line, which is the I'll be back. That tells a student you're not going to entertain the discussion right now. You sound angry. I'm not going to say that because I'm not psychic, but they do. So instead of walking over to an angry student that you know is already escalating and saying, you know what, that's not going to work here. We can't deal with this. You need to go to what we say is, I'll be back. So I notice you. I know that you're having a hard time. Are you okay here? I'll be back. And that is enough for almost any age student, lots of times, to feel they got noticed. So there's your attention. No one gave them too much negative attention by saying, for example, that just doesn't belong here. You can't be in this class right now. You need to leave. If you say, I'll be back, that can tell a student under all sorts of circumstances. You care about them, you notice them, and I know you can't talk right now because you look angry. It can tell them all those things. So it's how you say what you say. It's the language that shows that you really care about them. It's very hard for educators in a whole class. When you were talking about your scenario with your son, I was just thinking, yeah, and that is hard for a lot of classroom teachers. We have teachers down in New York region that are graduate and put right into special ed classes regularly, and they don't get training maybe till the next March or April. They've got the first how many months of the year, and that can be also a staff. Let's say he taught math for 5 years and now he's moved into a class with ASD students and they don't know much about them. So that's important too. You've got to look at a whole class, and you've got to look at a teacher and what their skill set is and what kind of behaviors are in that classroom. Chances are there isn't just one Rollie's son. There are others in that classroom that are just different. So we have different strategies for different kids. The same ones don't always work.
Yep. And that's one of the things is that, and using my son's classroom is that 90% of the, it was 90% boys in the classroom. Yep. And I think if there was 5 girls in the classroom, I think I'm probably pushing it. And the rest was all boys. And a good percentage of those kids had IEPs. Yeah. And so he wasn't the only student, but these strategies worked for him. And that was something that was like really important for us to be able to do. He's now 22. so he's like, we've moved through that stage, and he's learned to be able to manage some of those behaviors and some of those emotions. But like growing up, that was something that trying to be able to figure out, like, how am I supposed to tell people how I'm feeling, what it is that's going on, and how those things. And so Karen says, Marnee, appreciate your approach. So that is asking what happened. Frequently we go to the is the pathologist versus trauma-informed approach. And she said that's beautiful. So thank you very much, Karen. I love, and that's what I said. So when I met Marnee the first time, it was like, wow, somebody who actually gets it. Because at that point, I think my son was probably grade 8 or something like that. He was older. Maybe he was already in high school at that point as well. But like, that was one of the things that was like, wow, this is like remarkable of being able to teach the students and being able to work with the parents to be able to help them figure out how does this work. And sometimes some of the behaviors that are going on at school aren't going on at home, or vice versa.
Right. That's another key issue, because, and if you think again about skill set, right? So yeah, you could have a mom or a dad or an aunt or a grandma that are just great with that kid. There's always been a good relationship. They read them, they understand them, and they really don't see the behaviors. Behaviors happen when the student feels, for example, anxious. Anxiety is a huge thing with students now. And 40% of children that are identified ADHD are anxious. So there's a lot out there with anxiety now that looks very much like anger, but it's anxiety. So a parent, grandparent might understand it and just say, you know, what's the problem? And the love comes right out of their voice. A teacher in a classroom, maybe, you know, that's the third time you've done that. What's the problem?
Yeah.
They don't see it as anxiety because it's not easy for them to understand that piece. So I keep coming back to skill set for sure, but there has to be a willingness for educators to be able to say, I need to understand this behavior. And I was one, so I'm not trying to ridicule my own kind, but we really do have to take on that so many kids can be identified in one class. So reach out and ask and say, what's something I can try? What's a strategy I can use? And check yourself at the door. How many times is your tone and your volume not really sounding that loving? It's a word that we're not supposed to use too much, but it's so true. They know. Any kid knows at any age. They walk in their class and they look at your face, and the way you just look at them, forget the hello. She likes me. She doesn't like me. She's still angry about what I did yesterday. So that kind of educator, like a parent, you have to take a step back and realize they're not doing it on purpose. They're communicating something and we don't get it yet. And maybe they do need medication. This is true, maybe they do. But maybe we can also bring them along this path and involve family and also sit down with them. And that's another one, Rollie. Any age student, I've got some great stories when I do my PD. I've got grade 1 and grade 2 kids. They'll tell you what the problem is. You just have to ask them.
And I know that was one of the things that, because I was that proactive parent of, you know what, he has something to say. He's in the classroom. I have no idea what it is that's going on in the classroom. I'm not there. I don't know what his trigger is. And not that he never got triggered at home, but I could normally pick up his cues before things would actually become explosive. Usually, not always, because sometimes I was busy in my own life. And dealing with another son and dealing with whatever it is that I needed to be dealing with as a human. And so, so sometime, but I would bring him into his IEP meetings all the time. And so the teacher would say something, and then Case would respond with, yeah, but blah, 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 and would share whatever it is that was actually going on that was a different view than everybody else. And so, like I said, he's the one that transitioned from going from the child and youth room, because that was where the safety plan was initially, to I need to be able to go into the I need to be able to go to the principal's office. I need to be cool and not be seen. Right. So that was as he was getting older. I think he was in grade 5 or 6. And it was like, you know what? I don't want to go to child and youth worker room anymore, because other people are bugging me about me going for that emotional support. And I don't want to do that. But I'm not getting into trouble, or like nobody's giving me any flack if I have to go to the principal's office because I'm just being bad. Right. So it just allowed him to be able to save face, and that actually just helped. And so Sherry's still on watching live. And so Sherry said, I'm still watching because I am still learning from you myself. You are an amazing woman. So that's why Sherry's still watching.
She should get some kind of payment for that. Together. So I've known Sherry a long time. What it's going to say is something about what you said, that the students know, and that if we involve them. I wanted to mention something when you said what's the title for this, and being just half an hour. And I don't know how many parents will actually ever see this, but one I really feel strongly about is when the little kids that I told you about that are all First Nations kid, all in one behavior class in one public school. Sometimes things happen in schools that aren't entirely broad viewed. They're not entirely unbiased. And sometimes parents are told, you know what, we've got an IEP where these are all the recommendations, and there's 32, by the way, 32. I've seen 48 recommend. I don't even know what you're supposed to do with that. But anyways, they hand that to the parent and they say, now he's identified and he's going to get 50% support during the day, and he's going to go to these classes and these classes. I've met really intelligent parents, and when I ask them where their child is at school, they have no idea. And one of them is a good friend of mine who also Sherry knows from last year, and it's her grandchildren. And she had a really hard time, and she's very educated and she knows the school system. And she would look right back at me and say, I really don't know what's going on. And I said, but he's in grade 2, you should know. You need to know. And his dad needs to know. So I go back to parents again. They're winning with me. I really think parents are not advocated enough for. They're just told, there's the IEP. We need to put them in this class, or how about this one? Things have changed at the school this year. We don't have a lot of resource support for them. Good luck. That happens. It's called funding. But what do we do about that? And what do you do? Do you go into the school and say something? You do. You plan that meeting, you go in and you say, this is what grade 3 looked like, and this is why it was so good. Now he's in grade 4 and you're saying you don't have a lot of support. What am I supposed to do with it? How can we work together to make this work? Because he needs support. You've also got the situation where you've got teachers that don't get along with children. I mean, say it like it is. It happens. So who advocates for that family? Somebody that might know behavior, maybe like me, someone who's been in the system for 35 years, maybe, and it's worked before, Rollie, with secondary students too. I don't even know all the time how they find out about me, but they will find out and just say, look, we just want an advocate. Will you come in with us? Sure. I had a student several years ago that had a number of concussions, so he's on medical leave, and things weren't going well in the high school, and that's not entirely fair when you're on medical leave. It's a long story, but that's what they needed, was an advocate to work with them.
And that part there is like really, really important. And I know that I was the pain in the butt parent. I was in the school, whatever time that he would come home saying that this was going on, or if I would get a phone call saying, you need to come and get him, something's happened, I would be the parent that would be like, okay, great, I'm going to come and get him, but we're coming back for a meeting. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what it is that was going on, because he needed me to be able to advocate for him. And that was something that was really important, is that he couldn't always express his feelings. And so that is something that, so I would actually, and I was on the school council for every school council that my children were in. And I just moved from one school council to the next, because that was just really important for me to be able to be informed about what it is that's going on in the school. And so parents would come to me often and say, well, this is going on and we're having some difficulty with this. And those were the things that it would be like, get informed. Here is the information about the special needs, because there's regulations for the school ministry. And I know that there has to do with funding, but there's still always a way of being able to work with that. And so having somebody like you allows, and I wish that I would have actually known about you way back then, being able to, because then it would have made my advocacy part a little easier, but being able to be informed and being able to understand, like I researched the special ed curriculum and the special ed documents from the ministry, because it was just so important for me to learn about how can I support him. So I was the parent who I had my son diagnosed and ready to go, knowing that there was some difficulty with learning before he even started school, because as a proactive parent, I'm thinking that that's the easiest thing to do, but then he was labeled behavioral. And so then it was like, you go into the school and it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have this behavior kid. And it's like, no, we're not going to have this behavior kid. His name is Casey and he's pretty awesome. Is he a pain in the butt sometimes? Absolutely, but he's pretty awesome. And like, those are things that were like really important for us to be able to help through. And so when I was working in the school system or with the school, because my background is social work. So when I would actually go in and work with the school, with the students, those were the things that I would be doing, is working with them, trying to come up with a plan. How can we make this work so that it's going to work in the classroom and it's going to work for the student and it's going to work for the parent? Because these things need to be able to work together. And like I said, when I met you 5 or 6 years ago, it was like, wow, somebody else who has that same mindset. And I know that we're not the only two. There are definitely other people in the world. And but it was just, they're very few and far in between, right? So like you said, like you've got the teacher who looks at you like, and I've had kids that I was working with dealing with their mental health issues, and I'd had students that say, but my teacher doesn't like me. And I never would once say, no, they must like you, because if they're picking up on the fact that the teacher doesn't like them, then it was like, okay, then let's come up with a strategy so that we can actually get you through this school year. right? So because I can't make the teacher like them, I can't teach them to make the teacher like them. And
Yeah,
so
you can't lie to that student either.
no. So it's like, let's come up with a strategy. How can we actually make it work that you can actually come up with a plan? And so we would have a meeting with this teacher, with the principal, and come up with so if some of these things were going on, this is something that would actually be helpful. And I was working from a mental health perspective. So we already knew that they either had anxiety or they had depression or they had ADHD, like whatever it is that was going on from their own mental health. And so that was how that's how I was able to advocate for some of the kids that I actually worked with. And because those are some of the things that was really important. So Paul is on, and he says such great information. So for those of you who are actually on live or catching the replay, please feel free to share this video. Like, that would be really helpful for other parents to be able to hear some of the strategies or some of the other educators. And like I said, sometimes the behaviors are going on in daycares from a very young, and again, it's that same strategies. How can you actually work with the kids? How can you work with the kids and the family and the educators to be able to make those things work?
There's another thing. Could I just, you were there a minute ago. I'm wondering how many parents know that you can walk into a school and you can ask for an informal IEP, because after 35 years, I don't think there are many. So no. Parents think that their next step after in-school meetings and so-called maybe misunderstanding, miscommunication, we're having a difficult time, is, you know what we need? We need an assessment. If they get a private assessment, they're looking at 3,500, maybe I've seen them up to 5,000. If they're going with the board, it might be 2 years. So there's a thing that I call in the meantime. So what do they do in the meantime? So those parents, again, can advocate, Rollie, and they can say, you know, we've done our piece. In the meantime, what's working? Or let's get someone in to get strategies for what he's doing right now or what she's doing. When we came up with the title for this tonight, I wanted parents somehow to understand that they have a lot more options than they know, and they still do to this day. When they're told the student just isn't working right now, you need to back it up and say, tell me what you've tried. What do those strategies look like? You don't know them yet? Okay, let's get them in here. Let's get someone in to help. And I'm not trying to advocate for myself. Lots of boards have teams. They have people that can help. But just because you don't have a diagnosis or assessment doesn't mean that you can't use some strategies to help that child along. You don't have to sit and wait. And I'm going to tell you, in our board, I'm trying, it is someone I know well anyways, and I'm still continuing to work with her and a grandchild, and it's my board that I'm from, and things are not going smoothly. Communication is not open, and every time there's a meeting, it's sort of, we're always back to square one again. I thought we had this meeting, and I'm not there. I'm coaching, which I also do, so that they can go to the meeting, but they can be coached to ask the right questions. So it's also important for them to know. And really, I'm glad that you like digested a lot of the IEP information, but like, parents are busy. And I don't necessarily mean helicopter parents. I mean, they're just busy. So someone who's been in the system to be able to say, you know, you're not wrong. You're allowed to ask, what do those strategies look like? How are you accommodating my child? Why does it have level 1? What happened?
Well, and that's something that's like really important. And I didn't know that. So like, I didn't know that you can actually have an IEP without a diagnosis. And I was the parent who paid the big fees to be able to get the assessments done, because that was something that was really important. And it's not that I had tons of money, but it was like, no, my resources need to go to being able to get his assessment, because that's what they would be saying, is that they needed the assessments in order to be able to move forward. And so even with a child who had so like Casey, for example, we didn't hit none of his assessments. Not one of his assessments ever went through the board. And the excuse being that, oh, well, there's his needs aren't as high as everybody else's. And so like, he didn't fit. It's like, so in 8 years, he never fit the criteria to be able to get any special needs. So we paid for it out of pocket because it was important for us. And not that it's not important for other people. Sometimes the means were just not there, but for us, we made it happen. But it's like just so really important for us to be able to know that there is those different approaches and different ways of being able to do things, because those assessments are expensive, and the further north that you are, the more challenging it is to even be able to get those assessments done in the first place. So it's really challenging to be able to get, because we don't have a lot of resources up in Northern Ontario. It's a lot easier down in the southern parts of Ontario, because everything is like right there. And I'm talking about Ontario, and I'm sure that this is not just an Ontario issue. I'm sure that this is a Canada-wide or global issue, but like, it's just really important for us to be able to advocate for our kids and advocate for ourselves, and try and come up with plans as to what it is that's happening. And like you said, that one family is that you guys go back to the meeting and you guys are back at square one again. And I was, like I said, I was the parent who was, I'm not backing down. New principal comes in, well, guess what? Like, we're having a meeting because we need to make sure that we know what it is that's happening. And like I said, like, even so, the very first time before he was diagnosed with any learning disabilities, that was one of the things, because he had ADHD and ODD going in to school. So like, that part there was already done and labeled as behavioral. And it was like, so he's in grade 1, and this poor kid is sitting there in complete tears trying to do his homework, and he can't copy a sentence. And so he's trying to copy a sentence and write it out, and all he had to do was put a capital letter at the beginning and a period at the end. That was all his homework was. And this poor kid is devastated and in tears because he can't do that. Turns out the kid has dyslexia and dysgraphia. So he has difficulty with being able to do that basic. But when I brought that up to the special needs teacher, or the special ed teacher, her response was, well, it's just behavioral, and he's just trying to get out of his homework. And it's like, you weren't sitting at my kitchen table. You weren't sitting at my kitchen table with this kid who was like completely devastated that he could not do this homework. And so then we paid for the first assessment to be able to get it done and get things going. And so like, those are the things that are like really important for us to be able to tell our parents, right? So like, don't give up, keep moving forward. And I think that that's something that's really, really important for us to be able to remind people.
That's the communication piece that I was speaking about earlier. So you explained it well. Like, you have to be on the same page with family. If you've got family telling you this is what it looks like at home, chances are they're telling you the truth. And back to the assessment again, another thing about an assessment that it's really important for parents to understand is it gives a snapshot. And it's just like doing a test in grade 12. So if your son goes in or your daughter goes in to write in a very important exam in grade 12, and they're tired and they're anxious, and some things didn't go right in the last week, how do you think they're going to score on that exam? Not so well. Yeah. When an assessment is done, it has to be done over a period of time. And in the North, for example, I know that often doesn't happen at all. So it can be a short, little, tiny snapshot, and bam, we've got a diagnosis. So it's where you are at any given time. So we've got students that I've looked at that have been assessed 4 and 5 times before they've been to grade 8. We've also got students who were assessed in grade 1 and never again to grade 8. That's a little problematic. And then I had students, and this hasn't happened for a while, but it still does, that are assessed and there's a language barrier, if you can believe it. So they've come from another country. We put them through our same battery of tests. And this one little girl, she's now 30 and she's still a friend on Facebook. They actually diagnosed her with mild intellectual disability, which is slow learner. That's just something for parents. I wish I could just tell the whole world. I wish there was a banner out there. She's not a slow learner. She never was. She made it straight into the high school. I saw it. She saw it. I brought the parents in, and when was this assessment done? Who did it? It was in her first 2 months coming from India. That's when we did an assessment on her. It wasn't accurate. Not accurate at all.
Yeah.
And there she is sitting with it all the way into grade 11. Still calling her a slow learner. So assessments, you need to be honest about them. They're not always 100% accurate, period. But we also have to look at the student again and the family. What was the anxiety around that test? What kind of shape was the kid in that morning? And a psycho assessment, that they will say that in the first few paragraphs. they will say, you know, the student was fidgety, or the student didn't appear to want to be here, et cetera, et cetera. Then it's up to the assessor to try to get a very accurate picture. Anyways, back to me. Wouldn't it be great if you could just say to the family, here's some observations. He looks really anxious. Let's just try some of these strategies and see how he feels. And in the meantime, Rollie, you can be in a list for an assessment. Might happen in the next year or two.
And that would be so amazing if we could actually get our school system. And like I said, there are some really positive educators. There's some positive principals. There's some positive team members within the educational system. And like, I know that for us, our biggest thing was the educational assistants. Like, so our godsend for us was the educational assistants. So yes, the teachers helped teach him throughout the year, and throughout all the years of high school, but I mean, through grade school, but it was the EAs who actually helped him stay on track and helped him stay focused on his plan and helped us activate the plan that we set in place, that we actually helped him set in motion. Not always accessible because of the way that our school funding is, that it's challenging. But when I gave thanks to the, because I had to speak at my son's grade 8 graduation and gave thanks, I acknowledged the grade 8 teacher and said, great job. But it was like, and so the kids actually handed off a flower to each one of our educational assistants, as well as the classroom teacher, but like to all of the educational assistants that were actually in that room, because they're the ones that actually helped. Because like I said, my son comes from a classroom of boys that had multiple IEPs in that classroom from the time that they were in JK. And so like these EAs help them through getting through, and a lot of them actually moved from one classroom to the next and actually graduated with them, right?
Yeah, so known them for years.
Yeah, so like just really, really important. And teachers like at Bear Island, where they know these kids inside and out because they're a very small community, right? So they may be the grade 8 teacher, but they were also the grade 4 and 5 and 7, right? So like they actually moved around. And so like being able to work together as a team is key. And that is something that I don't think that we have enough. And having somebody like you to be able to help advocate is amazing. So one of the things that I'd like to be able to let people know, Marnee, is how to be able to get in touch with you, is if they have any questions, or if they have any need for your services, and or being able to help you, that you can actually help refer them to somebody or somewhere that they need to go, but at least being able to have somebody that they can actually connect with. Is that, would that be possible?
Yeah, Behaviour Strats, I've got my own website. It's been there the last 5 years. So there's a contact page on the last. If they could just remember Behaviour Strats, you can look that up and you'll see behaviorstrats.ca. And the last page is a contact page, or the email is behavior.strats@gmail.com.
So what I'm going to do, Marnee, is I'm going to put it in your in the comments, so that people actually have the opportunity to be able to find you easily. And like I said, Marnee is tagged in this. So if you're actually coming back and catching the replay, then hashtag replay and ask Marnee different questions of different scenarios that you may want to ask her. If you want to make it generalized, or share, like definitely share this video so that it actually goes out and other people can actually have access to that, because it is it's really important for us to be able to help support these kids in the school system. They are in school more than they're at home. And so if we can actually help to be able to make their lives easier, and again, some of the strategies or challenges that you're having at home, Marnie's a great resource of being able to help you with that as well. Because I think you do that. I think you do stuff at home as well as at school.
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I work with parents and it says on my website too, there were certain times on weekends that I even work, come up with times, but that's because parents, again, have a difficult time always making it to sessions. And that's the other reason for Skype again. It really is. I've got parents right in Aurora that have a very difficult time leaving home because of behavior child, don't you know? to go somewhere. So we'll Skype. So email's the best way to contact me. There's a landline associated, you can see on the website as well, but I'm not always here. So email really works. And then we can work out a Skype or a phone call. And it's not about what they pay. It's about their questions. Some questions can be answered rather quickly. And it says on the website also, it says 3 to 5 sessions. This is not psychology 101. There's strategies, next steps, what to do next. You just said, refer them, or have you tried this? Can I send you this? What I just did with Bear Island today, I did work with the educational assistants as well, but you send them strategy summaries. So that's what I send parents as well. These are the strategies we talked about. Here they are in writing, so they can have a look at them, try them.
That's awesome. And like I said, I'll definitely put all of your contact information on the in the Facebook page. And so like on this underneath this in the comment section where people have been commenting. And so is there anything else, Marnee, that we haven't touched on that you think is important for people to know, or did we cover everything that you?
I think you covered it really well. You asked me about specific strategies earlier, and I really didn't answer it because there are so many different kinds of behaviors. I didn't talk about specific ADHD or ASD or ODD. That's the kind of thing that comes through a consultation or really a one specific student. But there are a lot of strategies out there, and there are some very succinct, brief, simple strategies that work depending on what you're dealing with. So I think you covered it really well. Thank you. That's what I do.
Well, and that is amazing. Like I said, now I guess it's my turn for my dog. So
oh, is it?
Somebody must have come home. So, but like just, but like the things that you do is amazing. And I'm not your only fan because Shirley's been on and sharing that as well, right? So, and the feedback that we got from, Karen says that she was signing off and that she's going to catch the replay, but she was making comments as well. And Paul was here. And Shirley says, I've used the strategies and they do work. And they do. We just need to figure out what are the right strategies for the right child in the right environment, because what may work at home may not necessarily work at school as well, right? Because the atmosphere is different, the situations are different, and then you've got different children. So like Marnee said, like you've got different kids who are actually going to have different personalities, and different things are going to work for different kids. Different things are going to motivate them as well, right? So,
you know, a really good, I was trying to think of a good concluding line, because you really helped me cover it all, Rollie, you really did. But one is, and everybody knows it, it's William Glasser. He's still one of my favorites with choice theory. The only behavior you can change is your own.
Yeah.
So that is why I want to work with parents. And I want to work with educators to put on a different set of glasses and say, can you see him this way? Can you see her this way? Because I don't see her as a behavior. I see her as hurt. So put those different glasses on, handle them differently, and you'll get a different behavior. That's simple, because I changed my approach. You can't make them change, but you can change your approach. You can relearn. So
and teach them in the meantime. And that's what our role is as the adult in this world. Our role is to be able to help them, right? Yeah. So thanks again, Marnee. That was great. That was amazing. And like I said, I'll put your contact information in the comments so that people have access to them easily. And for those of you who are catching the replay, please share, because this is valuable, such valuable information, both as an educator or a parent or a grandparent. Marnee was talking about grandparents as well, right? So if you are in that child's world and you've watched this and you think that this is something that would actually be helpful for that, then reach out to Marnee. And I'm apparently not her only fan, which is actually, and I know that I'm not, because I've met other people that have worked with her as well. But Marnee is a wealth of information and a wealth of resources. And treating your child with dignity is definitely something that Marnee does. So thanks very much, Marnee, for
kind words. Thank you very much.